The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of red dust, and June Avery gripped her worn leather satchel tighter. Through the grimy window, she could see Red Mesa sprawled before her like a sun-bleached skeleton, wooden buildings leaning against each other for support, their paint peeled away by years of desert wind. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning the dusty main street into a shimmering ribbon of heat. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his voice rough as the gravel road they'd traveled. "This here's Red Mesa." June gathered her skirts and descended, her boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a soft thud. The smell hit her immediately: dust, horse sweat, and something else she couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or desperation. Towns like this always smelled of both. She stood there for a moment, taking in her new home. The telegraph office sat next to the general store, its new poles and wires a stark contrast to the weathered buildings. Progress had come to Red Mesa, but it looked as comfortable as a Sunday suit on a scarecrow. "You, the new cook," a woman's voice, sharp but not unkind, cut through June's observations. June turned to find a stout woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite the heat, she wore a high-collared dress and an apron that had seen better days. "I'm here about the chuck wagon position," June replied, keeping her voice steady. "June Avery." The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in June's tall frame and the calluses on her hands that no amount of cream could soften. "Margaret O'Rourke. I run the boarding house." She paused, lips pursing. "You're bigger than I expected. And older." June had heard it all before. At 34, she was past what most considered marrying age, and her height she stood eye to eye with most men didn't help matters. But she'd learned long ago that trying to make herself smaller only made the world push harder. "I can cook," June said simply. "That's what matters, isn't it?" "Mrs." O'Rourke snorted. "In a perfect world, maybe, but this is Red Mesa. Miss Avery, nothing perfect about it." She jerked her head toward the end of the street. "Boone Mercer's crew is camped just outside town. He's the trail boss you'll be working for if he takes you on. Fair warning, he's particular about who rides with his outfit." June nodded her thanks and started walking. Her dress, practical brown cotton that had served her well on the journey from Kansas City, was already collecting dust at the hem. She'd left everything behind: her small tailoring shop, her reputation, her life, all because of lies that spread faster than wildfire. The telegram in her satchel would clear her name. Once she could get it verified by a territorial judge. But first, she needed work. She needed to eat. The cattle camp announced itself before she saw it, the lowing of 1,500 head carried on the wind, mixed with the shouts of men and the crack of rope against hide. June crested a small rise and stopped, momentarily overwhelmed by the sight. The herd spread out like a brown sea. Cowboys riding the edges to keep strays from wandering. In the center of it all sat the chuck wagon, its canvas top like a ship's sail in an ocean of beef. A man stood beside the wagon, arms crossed, watching her approach, even from a distance. June could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a coiled spring. As she drew closer, details emerged: weathered face, sandy hair shot through with premature gray, eyes the color of winter sky. This had to be Boone Mercer. "Mr. Mercer." June stopped a respectful distance away, aware of the cowboys who'd paused in their work to stare. "That's right." His voice was gravel and smoke. "You the woman asking about the cook job?" "June Avery." She met his gaze steadily. "I heard you need someone for the drive north." Boone's eyes traveled over her, assessing. "You ever cook for 20 men on the trail? Ever try to keep biscuits from burning while the wind's trying to knock over your Dutch oven? Ever had to make do when supplies run low and the nearest town's a week away?" "No," June admitted. "But I've run a business on my own for 6 years. I can plan, organize, and make something out of nothing." I don't complain, and I don't cause trouble." "Everyone causes trouble," Boone said flatly. "Question is, what kind?" He studied her for another long moment. "Why's a seamstress want to cook for a cattle drive?" June had expected this question, had practiced her answer, but standing here under that penetrating gaze, she found herself speaking more truth than she'd intended. "Because I need to be somewhere else for a while. Somewhere people don't know my name or think they know my business." Something flickered in Boone's eyes, understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Running from something." "From lies," June said. "Nothing more, nothing less." Behind Boone, a younger man approached. He had the easy grace of a natural horseman and a face that probably broke hearts in every town they passed through. "Boss, we gonna stand here all day, or we gonna eat sometime this week?" Boone didn't look away from June. "This is Tom Rios, my segundo. Tom, Miss Avery here wants to cook for us." Tom tipped his hat, a genuine smile creasing his face. "Ma'am, hope you know your way around beans and beef. That's about all these boys know how to appreciate." "I can manage more than that," June said, allowing herself a small smile in return. "Cookie quit 3 days ago," Tom explained, ignoring the sharp look Boone shot him. Said he was too old for another drive. Truth is, he was tired of Boone's sunny disposition. "Tom," Boone's voice carried a warning. "What lady should know what she's signing up for?" Tom's grin widened. "Boss here runs a tight ship. No drinking on the trail, no fighting, no gambling that gets out of hand, and definitely no," he paused, glancing at June, "fraternizing." June felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "I'm here to work, Mr. Rios. Nothing more." "That's what they all say," muttered one of the cowboys who drifted closer. He was young, probably not yet 20, with the cocky swagger of someone who hadn't been knocked down enough times yet. "Till they get a look at Tom under the stars." "Shut it, Dale," Boone snapped. He turned back to June. "I'll be straight with you. Miss Avery, I don't like complications. I've got 1,500 head to get to Colorado, and I've lost too much already to take chances. You say you're running from lies. Well, lies have a way of catching up, especially on the trail." June reached into her satchel and pulled out the telegram, careful to keep it folded. "This will clear everything up. Once I can get it to a judge, until then, all I need is honest work and a chance to prove myself." Boone didn't reach for the paper. "Keep your secrets, if that's what they are. But the first sign of trouble, real trouble, and you're gone." "Understood." "Understood." A dust devil spun across the camp, scattering a few papers near the chuck wagon. June noticed the mess supplies half organized, pots still dirty from the last meal. The general chaos of men trying to manage without someone who knew what they were doing. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Dawn, day after tomorrow." Boone's eyes narrowed. "If you're still here." June squared her shoulders. "I'll need this afternoon to organize the wagon and take inventory. Tomorrow to buy what supplies we're missing. I'll need money for—" "Ned'll help you." Boone gestured to a boy near the wagon. Maybe 15, all knees and elbows. "He's been trying to keep us fed since Cookie left. Kid knows where everything is, just not what to do with it." The boy Ned Pike, she'd learn later, looked relieved at the prospect of handing over responsibility. June could see why. The cowboys were already gathering, hungry and expectant. "I'll start with supper," June said, rolling up her sleeves. "Ned, show me what we have." As she moved toward the wagon, she heard Boone behind her. "Tom, ride back to town. See what people are saying about our new cook." "Boss, you really think—" "I think I want to know what kind of trouble's following her before we're a week on the trail with no way to send her back." June pretended not to hear, focusing instead on the chaos of the chuck wagon. But her hands trembled slightly as she began sorting through the supplies. She needed this job, needed the distance it would put between her and Kansas City. The telegram in her satchel might clear her name eventually, But telegrams could be lost, or destroyed, or intercepted by the wrong people. She'd learned that lesson too late. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of rust and gold, June had the wagon organized and a meal started. The familiar rhythm of cooking soothed her nerves, cutting salt pork, soaking beans, mixing biscuit dough. This she could control. This made sense. The cowboys began drifting over as the smells of cooking filled the air. She caught their names in passing: Will, Sam, Roberto, others that blurred together. Most were polite enough, though she caught the speculative looks, heard the low murmurs. A woman in a cow camp was an oddity, a potential problem, definitely a source of gossip. Let them talk, June thought as she stirred the pot. They'd change their tune when their bellies were full. By the time Tom rode back from town, she had a meal ready that was simple, but good beans flavored with salt pork and wild onions she'd spotted growing nearby, biscuits light enough to earn approving nods, and coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. The men ate like they hadn't seen decent food in days, which, judging by the state of the wagon when she'd arrived, they probably hadn't. She was cleaning up, aware of Boone and Tom talking quietly by the remuda, when Ned appeared at her elbow. "Miss June, I mean. Miss Avery." His voice cracked on her name. "Thought you should know when I was in town earlier, getting supplies. I heard something." June's hand stilled on the pot she was scrubbing. "Oh. Man came in on the afternoon stage, same as you. Fancy dressed, asking questions about newcomers. Sheriff Crowley seemed real interested in what he had to say." The pot slipped from June's hands, clattering against the others. She caught it quickly, but not before several heads turned her way. "Sorry," she murmured, then lower. To Ned, "This man, did you see him?" Ned shook his head. "Just heard about it from Miguel at the general store. But Miss June..." He glanced around, then leaned closer. "Sheriff Crowley ain't exactly what you'd call an honest lawman. He's got his fingers in everything in this town, especially anything that makes money. If someone's looking for you and they've got Crowley's ear..." June forced her breathing to stay even. It was starting already, the lies following her, even here, even to this dusty corner of nowhere. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "But I haven't done anything wrong. Ned, sometimes that has to be enough." The boy looked doubtful but nodded. As he walked away, June caught Boone watching her from across the camp. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw the question there. Trouble, his expression asked. She turned back to her washing. "Not if I can help it," she answered silently. But as the desert stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, June couldn't shake the feeling that trouble had already found her. The question now was whether she could stay ahead of it long enough to reach Colorado, get her telegram verified, and clear her name, or whether Boone Mercer would decide she wasn't worth the risk and leave her behind in Red Mesa, at the mercy of whoever was asking those questions. She scrubbed harder at the already clean pot, as if she could scour away the past along with the burnt beans, but some stains, she'd learned, went deeper than surface dirt. Some stains followed you no matter how far you ran. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air. The cattle moved like a brown river across the desert, 1,500 head flowing north along the Dry Fork Trail. June had been up since 3, coffee brewing before the first cowboy stirred in his bedroll. Now, 4 days out of Red Mesa, she was beginning to understand the rhythm of trail life: the pre-dawn breakfast, the noon meal served wherever they stopped, the evening camp with its familiar routines. "Coffee's ready," she called softly, knowing the words would carry to the night guards coming off shift. Tom Rios appeared first, as he always did, offering her a tired smile. "Morning, Miss June. Smells like heaven." She poured him a cup, black as midnight and strong enough to wake the dead. "How was the watch?" "Quiet. Few strays wanted to explore, but we convinced them otherwise." He wrapped his hands around the tin cup, savoring the warmth. The desert nights were cold, something she hadn't expected. "Boss is already up, checking the remuda." June wasn't surprised. Boone Mercer seemed to sleep less than any man she'd ever met, always moving through the camp like a watchful ghost, checking, planning, worrying. She'd caught him several times standing at the edge of the firelight, staring into the darkness as if he could will away trouble through sheer vigilance. The other men began stirring as the smell of bacon and biscuits filled the air. She'd learned their preferences quickly. Will liked his eggs runny. Sam wouldn't touch anything green. Roberto had a sweet tooth that she satisfied with extra sugar in his coffee. Small things, but they mattered. A well-fed crew was a cooperative crew. "Miss Avery." Boone's voice came from behind her. She'd grown used to his silent approaches, though they still made her heart skip. "Need you to check your supplies. Water's getting scarce. We'll need to ration." She turned, noting the dust on his clothes, the weariness around his eyes. "How bad?" "The creek we were counting on is dry. Next reliable water is 3 days out, maybe 4 if we hit another dust storm." June did quick calculations in her head. "I can stretch what we have. Less water in the biscuits, more jerky and hardtack. Save the beans for when we reach water." He nodded, approval flickering across his face. "Good. Last thing we need is—" "Rider coming!" The shout came from Dale. "Out with the herd!" Boone's hand went to his gun, a gesture so automatic he probably didn't realize he'd done it. June saw him scan the horizon, then relax fractionally. "Just one, coming slow." The rider materialized out of the morning haze, and June recognized the bright Serape Miguel from the general store. But what was he doing out here? Senor Mercer Miguel pulled up his lathered horse, dust swirling. "I bring news from town. Important news." Boone's expression darkened. "What kind of news?" Miguel's eyes flicked to June, then back to Boone. "Perhaps we speak private." "Whatever you have to say it here." Boone's tone brooked no argument. Miguel dismounted, pulling a folded paper from his shirt. "The telegrapher, James. He is my cousin. Yesterday. A message comes for Miss Avery, but Sheriff Crowley, he takes it. Says it's evidence in investigation." June's heart hammered against her ribs. "Investigation of what?" "The sheriff says you stole money from a bank in Kansas. Says the telegram proves it." Miguel handed the paper to Boone. "But James, he copies message first. He knows Crowley's ways, doesn't trust." June watched Boone unfold the paper, his face giving nothing away as he read. The camp had gone quiet, everyone pretending to work while straining to hear. "This says June Avery is cleared of all charges," Boone said finally. "Says the real thief was caught with the money, a man named Harrison Ward, the bank manager's own nephew." He looked at June. "This the trouble you were running from?" June's legs felt weak with relief. "Ward courted me for months. I thought I was fool enough to think he cared, but he was using my shop as a way to move the stolen money. When the theft was discovered, he had papers showing payments to me for services. Made it look like I was part of it." "And you ran," Boone said, his voice neutral. The sheriff there was Ward's poker buddy. House searched, reputation destroyed overnight. I knew the truth would come out eventually, but... She lifted her chin. "Yes, I ran. Seemed smarter than sitting in jail waiting for justice that might never come." Miguel spoke up. "Sheriff Crowley, he burned the real telegram. Told the fancy man from Kansas that he'd arrest you when you came back through town. There's a reward, $500. "Fancy man still in town?" Tom asked, hand resting on his gun. "Sit at the hotel, but Senor Tom, there is more. Sheriff Crowley owns the water rights at Willow Springs. He charges terrible prices, and if people don't pay..." Miguel shrugged expressively. Boone's jaw tightened. "We'll find another way. Always do." He handed the telegram copy to June. "Keep this safe. Might need it in Colorado." As Miguel prepared to leave, He pulled June aside. "Senora Chen at the laundry. She says to tell you she'll send word ahead to her cousin in Santa Fe. There are ways to get messages that Crowley doesn't control. You have friends, Miss Avery." After Miguel left, trailing dust back toward Red Mesa, the camp slowly returned to normal. But June felt the shift. Some of the men looked at her with new suspicion, others with sympathy. She kept her hands busy with breakfast, refusing to acknowledge either. "Don't suppose that fancy man will just give up," Ned said quietly, helping her pack the wagon after breakfast. "No," June agreed. "But we'll be long gone before he figures out which way we went." The boy gave her a sideways look. "Boss doesn't like complications." "I know." She secured the coffee pot, checking the tie-downs twice. "But everyone's running from something out here. Ned, that's why they call it the frontier." The day grew hot as they pushed north, following the remnants of the dry fork. June rode the wagon, handling the team of mules with growing confidence. The constant sway had bothered her at first, but now she found it almost soothing. Behind her, the chuck box rattled with each bump, a percussion accompaniment to the bawling of cattle and the whistles of the cowboys. It was late afternoon when trouble found them. June saw the calf first, a little red thing, maybe 3 months old, stuck in a sand hollow off to the east. Its mother stood nearby, calling frantically, but the more the calf struggled, the deeper it sank. She pulled the wagon to a stop. "Boone, when he rode over," she pointed. "Calf stuck." He assessed the situation quickly. "Leave it. Can't spare the time or water." "It'll die." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Lots of things die out here." But he was already turning his horse, muttering under his breath. "Tom, get a rope. Dale, you too. Rest of you keep them moving." June climbed down from the wagon. "I can help." "You can stay with the wagon." Boone didn't look at her as he uncoiled his lariat. But June was already moving, studying the ground. The sand hollow was like quicksand. The more you fought, the worse it got. She'd seen similar in Kansas after spring floods. "Wait," she called. "You'll spook it worse. Let me try something." Boone turned in his saddle, impatience clear on his face. "Miss Avery." June ignored him, approaching slowly, keeping her voice low and steady. "Easy, little one. Easy now." She gentled enough horses to know the tone, the cadence that soothed frightened animals. The calf's eyes rolled white, but its struggling lessened. She knelt at the edge of the hollow, still crooning softly. The mother cow watched suspiciously but didn't charge. Carefully, June worked her hands under the calf's front legs, testing the sand's grip. "It's not as deep as it looks," she said. "If someone can keep the mother calm, I can guide it out. But I need rope to help pull." Tom dismounted, moving to distract the mother cow. Boone stayed mounted but tossed June his rope. She fashioned a simple harness, still talking to the calf in that low, rhythmic voice. "Now when I say, pull steady, not hard, just steady." She positioned herself, hands under the calf's chest. Now, working together, they eased the calf free. It stood on shaky legs, bawling for its mother, who rushed over to inspect her baby with anxious licks. June's dress was covered in sand and sweat, her hair escaping from its pins. She looked up to find Boone watching her with an unreadable expression. "Waste of water," he said finally, but his voice lacked its usual edge. "You'll need to wash that sand off before it ruins the fabric." "It's just a dress," June replied, brushing at the worst of it. "Get back on the wagon. We've lost enough time." He wheeled his horse around, but not before she caught something in his eyes: surprise, maybe, or a grudging respect. That night, as they made camp by a cluster of mesquite trees, June noticed Boone watching her again as she prepared supper. She'd changed into her other dress, hanging the sandy one to air out, but she could still feel the grit in her hair. "That was kindly done," Tom said, appearing at her elbow. "The calf, I mean." Seemed ashamed to leave it. June tested the beans, added more pepper. Everything dies out here, that's what your boss said. But not everything has to. Tom chuckled. You know why Boone runs cattle? June shook her head, stirring the pot. Used to have a small ranch down near the border. Him and his kid brother, Danny, good land, good water. Then rustlers hit while Boone was in town getting supplies. Danny tried to stop them. Tom's voice dropped. He was 16. They left him in the dirt and took everything cattle, horses, even the chickens. June's hand stilled on the spoon. How long ago? 3 years come fall. Boone spent every cent he had trying to get justice, but the rustlers had crossed into Mexico. Nothing the law could do, they said, so now he drives other people's cattle, saves every penny, says when he's got enough, he'll start over, build something those thieves can't take. And Danny buried him on that land. It's all Boone's got left of him, a grave and a deed to property he can't afford to stock. June understood now the constant vigilance, the harsh rules, the way Boone looked at every stranger as a potential threat. Loss could do that to a person, make them build walls so high even kindness couldn't scale them. Soup's ready. She called to the crew, ladling out portions as the men lined up with their plates. When Boone approached, last as always, she met his eyes. I'm sorry. About your brother. His face went still. He glanced at Tom, who suddenly found something fascinating about his boots. Then back to June. Tom talks too much. Sometimes talking helps. And sometimes it just reminds you what you've lost. He took his plate and walked to the edge of the firelight, sitting alone as he always did. June watched him go, then turned back to her duties. But throughout the evening, as she cleaned and prepared for the next day, she found herself thinking about a 16-year-old boy trying to save the family chickens, and a man who'd been carrying that weight for 3 years. Later, as the camp settled for the night, June made a last check of her supplies. The water situation was worse than she'd let on. They'd need to find some soon or start sacrificing coffee, maybe even cutting back on cooking altogether. Miss June, Ned appeared like a shadow. Thought you should know, saw dust to the south earlier. Could be nothing, could be riders following. June's stomach tightened. Did you tell Boone? Told Tom he'll pass it on. The boy shifted nervously. That man looking for you, what happens if he catches up? Then I face whatever comes, June said with more confidence than she felt. But I'd rather it didn't come to that. Yes, ma'am. Ned started to leave, then turned back. That thing with the calf today? That was something. Never seen anyone gentle a scared animal like that. Just takes patience, June said, and remembering what it's like to be scared yourself. As Ned disappeared into the darkness, June looked up at the vast canopy of stars. Somewhere behind them, a man with a badge and flexible morals was probably counting his potential reward money. Ahead lay uncertainty-dry trails, scarce water, and the constant threat of losing everything to weather, rustlers, or sheer bad luck. But for now, she had the crackle of the dying fire, the soft sounds of cattle settling for the night, and the knowledge that she'd saved one small life today. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was something. In the distance, she could see Boone making his rounds, checking on the night guards, ensuring everything was secure. A man carrying his losses like stones in his pocket, unable to set them down. She understood that weight. Maybe that's why she was here, really. Not just running from lies, but looking for a place where the past could finally be just the past, where people were judged by what they did today, not what others said about them yesterday. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the water shortage, the possibility of pursuit, the constant work of keeping 20 men fed on the trail. But tonight, June Avery allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She'd made good biscuits, saved a calf, and learned the story behind Boone Mercer's stone face. Small victories, perhaps, but on the frontier, sometimes small victories were all you got. And sometimes They were enough. The water at Willow Springs ran black. June knelt beside the corrupted stream, dipping her fingers in and immediately pulling back. The smell hit her rot and something chemical, unnatural. Around the springs, dead grass formed a brown circle like a target, warning of poison. "Don't touch it." Boone's sharp command came too late. She was already wiping her hand on her skirt, skin tingling where the water had touched. "It's been poisoned," she said, standing slowly. Around them, the thirsty cattle pushed forward, drawn by the scent of water they couldn't drink. "Get them back," Boone shouted to his men. "Tom, Roberto, drive them away from the springs now." The cowboys sprang into action, whistling and shouting, turning the desperate herd, but 1,500 head of thirsty cattle didn't turn easily. June watched in growing alarm as the animals fought against the riders, their need for water overwhelming instinct. "The whole spring," Tom called out, wrestling with a determined steer. "All of it," Boone confirmed grimly. "Someone dumped something upstream, coal oil, maybe, or worse." June's mind raced. They had maybe a day's worth of water left, less if she continued cooking. The next reliable source was Walker's Creek, 2 days north if they pushed hard. But pushing hard meant the cattle would need even more water. "Crowley," she said, not making it a question. Boone's jaw tightened. "Can't prove it, but yes, I'd bet my saddle on it. He owns these springs, charges triple what water's worth, when folks refuse to pay." He gestured at the poisoned stream. Boss Dale rode up fast, dust swirling. "Found tracks, maybe 6 riders, heading back toward Red Mesa. Fresh, no more than a few hours old." "They wanted us to find it like this," Tom said. "Finally getting the last stubborn cow turned away. Wanted us to know we can't have what we won't pay for." Ned appeared at June's elbow. His young face creased with worry. "Miss June, what about cooking can't make coffee or beans without water?" "We'll manage," June said, though her mind was already calculating. "Hardtack and jerky for now. Save what water we have for drinking." "The horses need it more," Boone corrected. "No horses, no drive. The men can go thirsty for a day. The horses can't." June wanted to argue, but saw the logic. Still, the thought of 20 men going without water in this heat made her stomach clench. There might be another way. Roberto spoke up. He was older than most of the crew, with silver threading through his black hair and eyes that had seen too much. "My grandfather knew these lands before the Anglos came. There's a hidden spring, very small, about 5 miles west. Agua Escondida, he called it." "Fairy tales won't keep us alive," Boone said harshly. "With respect. Jefe, my grandfather's knowledge kept many alive. The spring is real, small. Yes, not enough for the whole herd, but maybe enough to see us through." Boone considered, then nodded curtly. "Take 2 men and check. If it's there and clean, we'll send the wagon." He turned to June. "Can you stretch what we have?" "I'll find a way." She was already mentally rearranging her supplies, planning meals that needed no water. As the men dispersed to manage the restless herd, June noticed movement on the horizon, a dust plume too organized to be natural. Riders, moving parallel to them, staying just at the edge of visibility. "We've got company," she told Boone quietly. He followed her gaze, expression darkening. "Been there since morning, staying out of rifle range, just watching." "The man from Kansas?" "Maybe. Or Crowley's men, making sure we don't double back to town." He studied her face. "You holding up?" The question surprised her. In the weeks since she joined the drive, Boone had been all business, speaking to her only about meals and supplies. This small show of concern felt like a gift. "I'm fine. Worried about the men, though. This heat without water. They're tougher than they look. Even Dale, though he'd probably faint if you told him so." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone before she could be sure she'd seen it. "Mr. Mercer, June said carefully. What happens if Crowley's poisoned all the water sources ahead? Then we find another route. Go around his territory. That'll add weeks to the drive. Better than dying of thirst or paying that vulture's prices. His voice hardened again. I won't be robbed by men like him. Not again. June heard the echo of old pain in his words, his brother. The rustlers. Everything taken. She understood that kind of stubborn pride. The need to stand against those who would prey on others' desperation. Roberto returned within 2 hours, his horse lathered with sweat but his face bearing good news. The spring exists. Small, like I said, but the water is clear, sweet, even. How small, Boone pressed. Maybe enough to fill our barrels and water 20 horses. No more. It wasn't enough. Not nearly. But it was something. Boone sent June with a wagon, accompanied by Ned and 2 armed riders. The journey to Agua Escondida took them through a maze of red rock formations, following a path that seemed invisible until Roberto pointed it out. The spring was beautiful in its simplicity, a small pool of crystal clear water seeping from the rocks, surrounded by green grass and a few cottonwood trees. It looked like paradise after days of dust and dry terrain. Fill everything, June instructed, already calculating. Every pot, every canteen, every container we have. As they worked, Ned kept glancing at the rocks above. Good place for an ambush. Which is why we hurry. One of the riders said, his rifle across his saddle. June filled her personal water barrel last, tasting it first to ensure it was clean. The water was cold, with a mineral tang that spoke of deep aquifers. As she knelt by the spring, she noticed something carved into a nearby rock symbol she didn't recognize, worn smooth by time. Indigenous marks. Roberto explained, seeing her interest. Blessing the water, thanking it. My grandfather said we should always leave something in return. June pulled a silver button from her sewing kit, one of the few pretty things she'd kept from her old life. She placed it carefully beside the spring, whispering her own thanks. It might be foolish superstition, but out here, any gesture toward gratitude felt appropriate. They made it back to the herd as the sun touched the horizon, painting the desert in shades of fire. The men greeted the water with relief, though Boone enforced strict rationing. Each man got 1 cup for drinking, no more. What about coffee? Sam complained. Can't start a day without coffee. Then you'll learn, Boone said flatly. Save your complaints for someone who cares. But June noticed he took less than his share, pouring some of his ration back for the others. She said nothing, just made note of it, filing it away with all the other contradictions that made up Boone Mercer. That night, she served hardtack and jerky, supplemented with dried fruit she'd been saving. It wasn't much, but she'd learned presentation mattered, arranged properly. Even meager rations could seem like more. You're wasted as a cook, Tom told her, accepting his portion. Should be running a fancy restaurant somewhere. I had a shop once, June said, then wished she hadn't. Talking about the past invited questions. Making dresses. Tom's interest was genuine, not mocking. My sister does that. Says it's harder than breaking horses. Different kind of difficult. June handed out the last portions, noting who took extra and who shared. These small observations helped her understand the group dynamics, the invisible hierarchies and alliances. After dinner, she found Boone standing the watch at the edge of camp, staring out at the darkness where those mysterious riders had last been seen. They're still out there, he said without turning. Waiting for something. Maybe they're just traveling the same direction. Nobody travels parallel to a cattle drive without reason. Too slow, too dusty. He glanced at her. That telegram Miguel brought you, trust it's real. June pulled the paper from her pocket, smoothed it out. It's real, but Crowley destroyed the original, so proving it might be difficult. Everything's difficult out here. Boone studied the telegram in the firelight. Harrison Ward. That the man who courted you. Heat flooded June's cheeks. Tom told you. Tom tells me everything, eventually. He handed the paper back. Must have been convincing to fool you like that. I wanted to believe someone could see past. She stopped, swallowing the words. Past what? June gestured at herself. Past all this, too tall, too old, too set in my ways. When Harrison showed interest, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about my chances. Nothing wrong with being tall, Boone said quietly. Or knowing your own mind. Ward was a fool if he couldn't see your worth without scheming. The compliment, understated as it was, made her throat tight. Thank you. Just truth. He shifted his weight, checking his gun automatically. We'll reach Walker's Creek day after tomorrow if we push. The cattle won't like it, but they'll survive. After that, we're past Crowley's reach. And the riders following us. One problem at a time, Miss Avery. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound raised goosebumps on June's arms. Primitive fear of predators in the dark. But the real predators, she knew, walked on two legs and carried badges or banknotes. I should check on Ned, she said. Boy's been working himself ragged. He's tougher than he looks, too. But yes, check on him. He admires you. He's a good kid. He's had to be. Father died in a mine collapse. Mother took sick. He's been on his own since he was 13. I found him trying to rob my saddlebags in Amarillo. Boone's voice held no judgment. Gave him a choice, jail or honest work. He chose work. You have a habit of taking in strays, June observed. Pot calling the kettle black? Miss Avery. Saw you feeding that mange-ridden dog yesterday. He was hungry. They're always hungry. Doesn't mean you have to. He stopped suddenly, holding up a hand for silence. June herded two horses, moving fast, coming from the south. Boone drew his gun in one smooth motion, pushing June behind him. Riders coming in, he called to the camp. Everyone up now. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Men rolling from bedrolls with weapons ready. June found herself pressed against the chuck wagon, heart pounding. The riders materialized from the darkness, 3 men, badges glinting in the firelight. Sheriff Crowley himself led them, his thick body swaying in the saddle. Evening. Mercer, Crowley called, reining up just outside the ring of armed cowboys. Heard you were in my territory. Public land, Boone replied evenly. Just passing through. With a wanted fugitive, I'm told. Crowley's pig-like eyes found June. Miss Avery, I'll need you to come with me. There's a warrant from Kansas. Based on false charges, June said, finding her voice. I have a telegram. Telegrams can be forged. Crowley interrupted. But a warrant's a warrant. You can explain to the judge. What judge? Boone stepped forward. You mean the one who owes you for his appointment? The one who hasn't seen a law book since before the war? Crowley's face darkened. Careful. Mercer. Interfering with a lawful arrest is serious business. So is poisoning water sources. Tom called out. Several cowboys murmured agreement. That's a dangerous accusation, Crowley said softly. Man could find himself in real trouble, making claims like that. The truth's not a claim, Roberto said. We all saw the springs. The tension stretched taut. 20 cowboys facing 3 lawmen, hands hovering near weapons. June realized with cold clarity that this could explode into violence with one wrong word. I'll go, she said suddenly. No. Boone's response was immediate. You're under my protection until this drive's done. Your protection doesn't extend to harboring fugitives. Crowley sneered. Hand her over, or I'll arrest the lot of you. Try it, Dale said, young voice cracking with bravado. Crowley's hand moved toward his gun, and June saw it all unfolding, the violence, the deaths, all because of her. She couldn't let that happen. But before anyone could draw, a new voice cut through the standoff. "Evening, Sheriff. Gentlemen." A lone rider approached from the east, hands visible and empty as he entered the firelight. June recognized the territorial marshal's badge on his vest. Marshal Jim Holloway, a legend in these parts. "Marshal," Crowley said, voice suddenly less certain. "Didn't know you were in the area."
"Lot of things you don't know. Silas."
Holloway dismounted with the easy grace of a man comfortable with danger.
"Got an interesting telegram today. From a judge in Kansas. Real judge. Not like that puppet you prop up in Red Mesa."
He pulled out a paper, holding it where everyone could see. "Says here all charges against Miss June Avery have been dropped. Says the real thief confessed. Seems someone was trying to intercept this information." "That could be forged," Crowley started. "Could be," Holloway agreed amiably. "That's why I wired back for confirmation. Got the whole story. Interesting reading. Especially the part about someone offering rewards for a woman already cleared of charges." Crowley's face had gone pale in the firelight.
"I was just following up on information received."
"Sure you were." Holloway's voice was mild, but his eyes were steel. "Just like those poisoned springs are natural occurrence. Just like those robbery reports against Mercer's outfit are legitimate." "What robbery reports?" Boone demanded. "The one Silas here was planning to file tomorrow? Amazing how I know that. Isn't it?" Holloway smiled without humor. "Here's what's going to happen. You three are going to ride back to Red Mesa. You're going to forget about Miss Avery. And if I hear about any more poisoned water sources or false charges, well, I'll have to get federal involved. They're real interested in corruption these days." Crowley's jaw worked like he was chewing nails.
"You can't prove anything."
"Don't have to. Federal investigators are thorough. They'll find what needs finding." Holloway stepped aside, clearing the path. "Best get riding. Long way back in the dark." For a moment, June thought Crowley might actually try something. His hand twitched toward his gun, his face mottled with rage. But his men were already backing their horses away, recognizing the marshal's authority. "This isn't over," Crowley said finally.
"Yes,"
Holloway said quietly.
"It is."
They watched the three ride away, nobody speaking until the hoofbeats faded. Then the camp exploded in relieved chatter, the tension breaking like a snapped rope. "Marshal," Boone said, holstering his gun, grateful for the timing. "Lucia Chen sent word," Holloway explained. "Smart woman. Knew I was circuit riding nearby." He looked at June. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for what you've been through. Man named Ward is sitting in jail in Kansas, and there's compensation coming from the bank. Won't make up for the trouble, but it's something." June felt her knees go weak after running so long. The idea that it was over seemed impossible. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me. Thank the folks who stood by you." Holloway remounted, touching his hat. "Mercer, keep your people safe. Crowley's mean as a snake when cornered." "Always do," Boone replied. As the marshal rode away, June found herself surrounded by the crew, all talking at once. Ned was grinning wide enough to split his face. Tom was slapping backs. Even stoic Roberta was smiling. "All right, settle down." Boone called. "Still got a drive to finish. Double the watch tonight, just in case." As the men dispersed, he turned to June. "Could have told me you sent word to the marshal." "I didn't. That was Lucia's doing." June wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm night. "I can't believe it's over." "It's not," Boone said. "Crowley won't forget this, but you're safe for now." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "You did right, offering to go with them. Took courage. It would have taken more courage to let you all fight for me. That's what we do out here, fight for each other." His voice softened. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard, and the day after worse. We still need to reach water." June nodded, but didn't move. "Boone, Mercer, why did you stand up to them? You could have just let them take me." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My brother died because no one stood up, because folks figured it wasn't their problem. I won't make that mistake again." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing by the chuck wagon. Around her, the camp settled back into routine, men finding bedrolls, guards taking positions, the endless watch against dangers in the night. June looked up at the stars, brilliant in the clear desert air. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running. She was just moving forward, part of something larger than her own troubles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They still faced thirst, exhaustion, and the grueling push to Walker's Creek. Crowley might be backed off for now, but men like him didn't give up easily. And somewhere in the darkness, those mysterious riders were still watching, waiting. But tonight, she was June Avery, cook for Boone Mercer's outfit, cleared of all charges and surrounded by men who'd stood ready to fight for her. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but increasingly, she thought it might be the life she was meant to find. She checked her supplies one more time, planning tomorrow's waterless breakfast, then found her own bedroll. In the distance, a mockingbird sang its complicated song, borrowing melodies from a dozen other birds. Like all of them out here, June thought, borrowing strength from each other, creating something new from the pieces of what they'd been. The thought followed her into sleep, a comfort against the vast darkness of the frontier night. The night was bitter cold, unusual for the season, and the cattle were restless. June could hear them lowing uneasily, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She'd been up checking supplies when she heard a sound that didn't belong to the desert night. Boone appeared from the darkness, his face tight with exhaustion and stress. They'd made it to Walker's Creek that afternoon, but the water was lower than expected, barely enough to satisfy the thirsty herd. Now, with Crowley's threats still echoing and those mysterious riders somewhere in the darkness, every shadow seemed to hold danger. "Can't sleep." His voice was rough, worn down by days of shouting orders over wind and cattle. "Something's bothering them," June said, nodding toward the herd. "The horses, too." Boone listened, his whole body tense. In the weeks since the confrontation with Crowley, he'd been pushing harder than ever, driving the herd through brutal heat and scarce water. The men were exhausted, the cattle footsore, and still those riders shadowed them, always staying just out of reach. "Probably just the cold," he said, but June could see he didn't believe it. She turned back toward the chuck wagon, then stopped. In the corral, among the remuda, stood a horse she'd noticed before, a Mustang mare, wild-caught and only half broken, with scars along her sides that spoke of rough handling. The cowboys called her broken, said she was too damaged to trust anyone. The mare was trembling, head down, and June could see why. A rope had tangled around her leg, cutting into the flesh. With each movement, it tightened further. "That horse," she started. "Leave it," Boone said sharply. "She's dangerous. Kicked Sam last week. Nearly took Dale's head off yesterday." But June was already moving, drawn by something in the mare's posture, not anger, but defeat. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror, after Harrison's betrayal. "Stop crying and cook," Boone snapped, his temper finally fraying. "That's what I pay you for, not playing with horses that—" He stopped mid-sentence. June had reached the corral fence and slipped through the rails, moving with a calmness she didn't entirely feel. The mare's ears went back, but June kept coming, her voice low and steady. "Easy, girl, easy now. I know it hurts." She knelt in the dirt, making herself smaller, non-threatening. The mare watched with wild eyes, muscles bunched to flee or strike, but June just sat there, patient as stone, humming something an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Slowly, so slowly, Boone found himself holding his breath. The mare's head lowered. June's hands were gentle as she worked at the rope, never grabbing, never forcing. When the mare flinched, June stopped, waited, started again. "That's it," June whispered. "Nobody's going to hurt you, not anymore." The rope came free, and June carefully examined the cut it had left. Not deep, but painful. She tore a strip from her petticoat, her last good one, and carefully wrapped the wound. Through it all, the mare stood still, trembling but allowing the touch. When June finally stood, the horse actually stepped forward, resting her muzzle against June's shoulder for just a moment before shying away. June turned to find Boone standing at the fence, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I shouldn't have." "You're exhausted," June said, slipping back through the fence. "We all are." "That's no excuse." He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was struggling with something. "I've been carrying too much," June finished. "I know the feeling." They stood there in the cold night, the space between them charged with something June couldn't name. Then Boone spoke, his voice different, softer, more real than she'd ever heard it. "Don't you go hiding who you are." The words hung in the air between them. June felt them settle into her chest, warming something that had been cold for months. "I've been hiding for so long, I'm not sure I remember who that is," she admitted. "I saw her just now," Boone said. "With that horse, someone who sees hurt and tries to fix it, even when it's dangerous, even when it's not her job. Sometimes fixing things is everyone's job." Danny used to say something like that. The name came out careful, like something fragile. Said we were all responsible for each other, whether we liked it or not. June waited, sensing this was important, this midnight confession under desert stars. "He was gentling a horse when they came," Boone continued. "Wild Mustang, mean as they come. I told him to forget it, sell it for hide. But Danny said everything broke and deserved a chance to heal." His voice caught. "They shot him while he was trying to protect that worthless horse. And you know what? The horse stayed, stood over his body until I got home. Wouldn't let them near him." "What happened to the horse?" "I kept her, learned to ride her, eventually. She was the best cow pony I ever had. Lost her in the same raid that took the rest." He looked at June. "Haven't been able to work with a difficult horse since. Keep seeing." "Your brother," June finished softly. "You remind me of him sometimes. That patience, that stubborn belief that broken things can be fixed." June's throat felt tight. "Maybe they can't be fixed, but maybe they can learn to work around the breaks. Like you're doing." "Like we're all doing." She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "Running from what hurt us, trying to find somewhere it can't follow." "It always follows." Boone said, "The trick is learning to walk with it instead of from it." A coyote called in the distance, and the mare in the corral nickered softly. June noticed Boone had moved closer, close enough that she could see the lines exhaustion had carved around his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said, "not just for tonight, for treating you like a problem to be managed instead of a person. You were protecting your men. I was protecting myself." The admission seemed to cost him. "It's easier to keep people at arm's length. Safer. Lonelier, too." "Yes." He met her eyes. "I'm tired of lonely, June." Her name on his lips. Without the formal miss sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the weather. "Boone." "Boss!" Tom's urgent call shattered the moment. "Riders coming in fast." Boone's hand went to his gun, all softness vanishing. "How many?" "Can't tell. 4, maybe 5. "Wake everyone, quietly." He turned to June. "Get to the wagon, stay down." But June was looking past him, at the approaching dust cloud visible in the moonlight. "Wait, I know that horse." The lead rider emerged from the darkness, and June's heart sank. Harrison Ward himself, accompanied by 4 armed men. He looked exactly as she remembered handsome in that calculated way, like a snake in a suit. "Jewel," Harrison called out. reining up just outside the camp.
Thank God I found you. Mr. Ward.
Her voice came out steady, though her hands trembled. I heard you were in jail. A misunderstanding, Harrison said smoothly. All cleared up now. I've come to take you home.
This is my home now.
Harrison's perfect smile faltered. Don't be ridiculous. You can't seriously prefer this. He gestured at the camp. To your shop. Your life. The shop you destroyed, the life you ruined with your lies. I said it was a misunderstanding. His voice hardened. I've ridden 300 miles to find you. The least you can do is hear me out. Boone stepped forward. The lady said she's staying. Harrison's eyes flicked over him dismissively. And you are? The man telling you to leave. I don't take orders from saddle tramps. Harrison's hand moved to his coat. I have papers here, documents proving... Proving what? Marshal Holloway materialized from the darkness, badge glinting. June wondered how long he'd been following Harrison. That you're out on bail, that you're violating the terms by leaving Kansas. Harrison went pale. Marshal, I didn't... This is a private matter. Nothing private about hunting a woman across 3 territories. Holloway moved his horse closer. Judge Monroe's going to be real interested to hear about this. She has property of mine, Harrison said desperately. Money she took. The money you stole and tried to blame on her? June found her voice. Anger burning away fear. The only thing I took was my dignity, and that was never yours to begin with. You were nothing before me, Harrison snarled, mask finally slipping. A spinster seamstress in a nowhere town. I made you feel special. Made you believe someone could want... The sound of Boone's fist connecting with Harrison's jaw was loud in the still night. Harrison tumbled from his saddle, landing hard in the dirt. That's enough, Boone said quietly, dangerously. You've said your piece. Now get. Harrison struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. You'll regret this, all of you. Only thing I regret, June said, stepping forward, is wasting 1 minute believing your lies. But you taught me something valuable. Harrison, you taught me what false love looks like. Now I know the difference. She felt Boone's presence beside her, solid and real. Harrison must have seen something in their faces, because he backed toward his horse. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Holloway said calmly. It is. Boys, escort Mr. Ward back to Kansas. Make sure he gets there safe. And Harrison, next time you violate bail, it won't be a friendly escort. They watched Harrison and his men ride away, Holloway's deputies flanking them. The camp slowly relaxed, men lowering guns, returning to bedrolls. You all right? Boone asked quietly. June realized she was shaking. Yes, no, I don't know. Come on. He guided her to the chuck wagon, poured coffee from the pot she always kept warm. Drink this. She wrapped her hands around the tin cup. I can't believe he found me. Men like him can't stand losing, makes them stupid. Boone sat beside her on a crate. What you said, about knowing the difference now. June looked at him, this man who just defended her with his fists, who saw her worth even covered in trail dust and wearing a torn petticoat. Real caring doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't make you smaller to build itself up. No, Boone agreed. It doesn't. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching. Around them, the camp settled back to sleep, though June noticed the guards were extra vigilant. That horse, Boone said eventually, broken. Think she can be gentled. With time, patience, someone willing to show up every day, even when it's hard. Might try it, when we get where we're going. He paused. Could use some help. If you're staying. June heard the question under the question. I'm staying. Good. He stood, then surprised her by taking her hand briefly. Don't hide who you are. June. World needs more people who see the broken and try to help. After he'd gone back to his rounds, June sat alone with her coffee, thinking about broken horses and broken people, about the courage to trust after betrayal. In the corral, the mare stood quietly, moonlight silvering her scarred hide. Tomorrow would bring more trail, more challenges. Crowley was still out there, smarting from his defeat. The drive was only half done, with mountains and rivers still to cross, and June herself had to figure out what came next. After Colorado, after the cattle were delivered, but tonight she'd stood up to her past and found it had no power over her. She'd been really seen by a man who understood what it meant to carry wounds, and she'd been told not to hide who she was, by someone who was learning the same lesson. In the morning, she'd make biscuits and coffee, tend the mare's wounded leg, face whatever the trail brought. But right now, June Avery sat in the darkness and felt, for the first time in months, like she was exactly where she belonged. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal, but here on earth, in this small circle of wagons and sleeping cowboys, something had shifted. Two broken people had recognized each other across the careful distances they maintained. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the promise of it, fragile as a Mustang's trust, strong as the hands that refused to let go. And that, June thought, was enough to build on. The storm came without warning, turning the afternoon sky from brass to black in minutes. June had seen storms before, but nothing like this, rain falling in sheets so thick she couldn't see the wagon's team, wind that threatened to tear the canvas from its hoops. Get them to higher ground, Boone's voice cut through the chaos, barely audible over the thunder. Push them up now. June fought to control the mules as water rose around the wagon wheels. What had been a dry wash an hour ago was now a raging torrent. She could hear cattle bellowing in panic, cowboys shouting, the whole world dissolving into water and noise. Miss June, Ned appeared at her side, soaked through, eyes wide with fear. I can't find Tom. He was checking the drag when a wall of water slammed into them. June felt the wagon lift, tilt, and she grabbed Ned's arm just as they were both thrown into the flood. The current was vicious, full of debris and struggling cattle. June's skirts tangled around her legs, dragging her down. Then strong hands hauled her up. Boone, on horseback, had grabbed her while Tom, thank God. Tom had caught Ned. They fought their way to a small rise, horses struggling against the current. The wagon, June gasped. Let it go, Boone shouted. Hold on. She wrapped her arms around him as his horse battled through the flood. Around them, cowboys worked desperately to save what they could, cattle, horses, each other. The rain fell so hard it hurt, like being pelted with stones. They made it to higher ground where the surviving herd milled in misery. June slid from the horse, immediately looking for injuries among the men gathering there. Dale was holding his arm, wrong dislocated shoulder. Sam had a gash on his forehead, but they were alive. Count, Boone ordered. Every man, every horse. The tally was grim. They'd lost nearly 100 head, swept away by the flood. 3 horses gone, including one with its rider's gear. The chuck wagon was overturned half a mile downstream, contents scattered or ruined. Could have been worse, Tom said, trying to sound optimistic despite the blood running from a cut on his cheek. It is worse. Roberto pointed to the sky. This isn't over. He was right. The storm intensified, forcing them to huddle together. Men and horses and remaining cattle, all seeking whatever shelter they could find. June worked through the group, using torn pieces of her already ruined dress to bind wounds. Her medical supplies were gone with the wagon. Night fell without the storm breaking. No fire was possible. No hot food. The men gnawed on whatever they'd had in their pockets, jerky. Hardtack turned to mush. June found herself pressed between Boone and Ned, sharing body heat as the temperature dropped. My fault, Boone said quietly. voice almost lost in the rain. Should have seen it coming. Should have...
Stop,
June said firmly. Nobody could have predicted this. I'm supposed to predict everything. That's the job. His voice was raw with exhaustion and self-blame. Lost cattle, supplies, maybe men if infection sets in. Crowley's probably laughing in his dry office right now. June found his hand in the darkness, squeezed it.
We're alive. That's what matters.
Morning brought weak sunshine and devastation. The landscape had been rearranged by the flood-familiar landmarks gone, new channels carved in the earth. They found the chuck wagon eventually, broken beyond repair. June salvaged what she could: a few pots, some flour that had stayed dry in its sealed tin, precious salt. We can't go on without supplies, Dale said, stating the obvious. Young as he was, even he could see their situation. Nearest town is Preston, 2 days east. Tom calculated, but that means backtracking, losing more cattle to exhaustion. No choice. Boone decided. June, you'll ride with Tom to Preston. Get what we need. The rest of us will hold here. Let the cattle recover. I should stay, June protested. The injured men... We'll survive 2 days. You know what supplies we need better than anyone. His tone brooked no argument, but June saw the concern in his eyes. Sending her away from his protection clearly bothered him. They left at dawn the next day. June riding Tom's spare horse, a gentle gelding named Moses. She'd never spent so much time in the saddle, and every muscle protested. But she kept pace, driven by the knowledge that the crew was counting on them. Preston appeared like a mirage, a proper town with wooden sidewalks and glass windows. June felt strange entering civilization after weeks on the trail, her ruined dress and sunburned face marking her as an outsider. I'll see about a wagon, Tom said. You handle the supplies. June nodded, squaring her shoulders as she entered the general store. The proprietor looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. Help you, miss? I need supplies for 20 men, June said briskly, pulling out the list she'd made. Flour, coffee, beans. Cash only, the man interrupted. No credit for drifters. June pulled out the money Boone had given her most of his operating funds. Cash then. She was deep in negotiations when she heard the voice that made her blood run cold. Well, June Avery. Sheriff Crowley stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking the light. Behind him were 2 deputies, hands resting on their guns. Sheriff, June said evenly. Didn't expect to see you in Preston. Got friends everywhere. Miss Avery. Heard there was a woman matching your description buying supplies. Thought I'd investigate. I've been cleared of all charges. You know that. I know Marshal Holloway filled your head with ideas, but he's not here. Is he? Crowley smiled, and it was worse than a scowl. Had some interesting news from Kansas. Seems Mr. Ward never made it back. Disappeared somewhere on the trail. His family's offering a reward for information. June's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. I wouldn't know about that. Last I saw, the marshal's men were escorting him home. Funny thing those deputies say they lost him in a storm. Say he rode off on his own. Crowley moved closer. Man like that doesn't just disappear, unless someone made him disappear. That's a serious accusation. Just thinking out loud. But a woman who'd steal from a bank might do worse to keep her freedom. The shop had gone quiet, other customers edging away. June felt the walls closing in, the same trapped sensation she'd felt in Kansas when the lies started. I didn't steal anything, she said, and I certainly didn't harm Harrison Ward. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, think I'll take you back to Red Mesa. Let my judge sort it out. You have no authority here. Tom's voice came from behind Crowley. The younger man stood easy, relaxed, but June saw his hand near his gun. Preston's outside your jurisdiction. Boy, you don't want to interfere with the law. Good thing you're not the law here. The Preston sheriff, a thin man named Morrison pushed past Crowley. "Silas, we've talked about this. You can't arrest people in my town without cause." "I have cause." "You have gossip and spite," Morrison said flatly. "Miss, you finish your business. Silas, time for you to go." Crowley's face went purple. "This isn't over. That woman's a thief and worse, and I'll prove it." "Not in my town," Morrison said, after Crowley stormed out. June's hands shook as she completed her purchases. The shopkeeper, perhaps feeling guilty, threw in extra coffee and a bolt of cheap cloth. Crowley's been throwing his weight around for years, Morrison told her as Tom loaded the wagon they'd acquired. "About time someone stood up to him. You watch yourself, though. He's mean as a rattler when crossed." They made camp that night halfway back to the herd, June still shaken from the encounter. Tom built a small fire, made coffee with their new supplies. "You all right?" he asked. "Harrison's really missing." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Heard the same rumor in town, but Miss June, there were a dozen witnesses saw him ride off with those deputies. If something happened after, it's not on you. Crowley will make it seem like it is." "Crowley's reaching. Desperate men do that." Tom poured more coffee. "Boss isn't going to let anything happen to you." June thought of Boone, waiting with the herd, probably driving himself to exhaustion trying to hold everything together. "He can't fight the whole world for me." "Sure he can. Man's stubborn enough." Tom grinned. "Besides, he's not fighting for you. He's fighting with you. There's a difference." They reached the herd the next afternoon to find organized chaos. Boone had the men building a temporary shelter, preparing for another storm brewing on the horizon. When he saw June, something crossed his face, relief so profound it took her breath away. "Get what we needed?" he asked. "All business." But his hand brushed hers as he helped her down from the wagon. "Yes, but Boone Crowley was in Preston. He's saying Harrison Ward is missing." Boone's expression darkened. "Tom, it's true, but it's also not our problem. Ward rode off with the deputies. What happened after is between him and God. Crowley will make it our problem." Boone looked at June. "I'm sorry, this is getting worse instead of better." "It's not your fault. I promised to protect you." "You have?" June met his eyes. "You are. But some fights can't be won with fists or guns. Crowley's going to keep coming until..." "Until what?" June took a breath. "Until we find out what really happened to Harrison. Someone knows. Someone saw. That's not our job." "No, but it might be our only choice." Lightning split the sky, and the first fat raindrops began to fall. Boone cursed, turning to shout orders about securing the supplies. But June saw the way he looked at her, the promise in his eyes. They'd weather this storm, just like the last one. But the real tempest was human Crowley's vendetta, Harrison's disappearance, the price of June's freedom climbing higher with each passing day. As she hurried to help cover the supplies, June thought about justice and truth, about how sometimes they were the same thing and sometimes they were strangers. The rain came harder, washing the earth clean, but some stains went deeper than any flood could reach. She'd been cleared of theft, but now there were whispers of worse, and out here, whispers could kill as surely as bullets. But she wasn't alone. That was the difference between now and Kansas. She had Boone, Tom, Ned, even Roberto and the others, a strange family forged on the trail, bound by shared hardship and mutual respect. Thunder crashed overhead as the storm hit full force. June worked alongside the men, saving what they could, fighting the elements together. In the chaos, she caught Boone's eye, saw him nod once a promise, a pact. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Even if it meant turning from the trail to hunt the truth about Harrison Ward, even if it meant confronting Crowley on his own ground. The cattle lowed miserably in the rain. The men cursed and struggled. And June Avery, no longer hiding who she was, stood in the middle of it all and refused to be washed away. Justice might be slow and truth might be elusive, but she'd learned something out here in the vast indifference of the frontier. Sometimes you had to make your own of both. The storm raged on, but June's resolve only grew stronger. Whatever Crowley thought he knew, whatever had happened to Harrison Ward, she would face it. But first, they had to survive the night, the storm, and each other's stubborn pride. In the morning, if morning came, they would decide which direction to turn north to safety or back to danger. June already knew which way Boone would choose. He'd face the threat head-on, protect his people, seek the truth even if it burned them all. That's who he was, and increasingly, June realized, that's who she was becoming too. The frontier didn't just test you, it transformed you, stripping away pretense until only the essential remained. And what remained of June Avery, standing in the torrential rain with damaged people she'd come to care about, was someone who no longer ran from fights that needed fighting, even if those fights seemed impossible to win. The smell hit them first: smoke, thick and acrid, carried on the evening wind. June was serving supper when Roberto rode in hard, his face grim.
Fire, he shouted. The old stable in Coyote Flat, it's burning.
Boone was on his feet immediately. That's where the settlers store their winter feed. How bad?
Bad. Whole thing's going up. People trying to save what they can.
June's heart sank. Coyote Flat was a small community of homesteaders, barely scraping by. Losing their feed storage would mean starvation for their animals come winter. We're going, Boone decided. Tom, get every man who can ride. June. I'm coming, she said firmly. They'll need medical help. They rode hard through the darkness, the glow on the horizon growing brighter. June clung to Moses, her borrowed horse, trying not to think about what they'd find. Behind them, they'd left a skeleton crew with the cattle. Everything else could wait. The scene at Coyote Flat was chaos. The stable, a massive old structure that served the whole community, was fully engulfed. Families formed bucket brigades, but it was hopeless. The fire was too big, too hot, fed by tons of dry hay.
The horses, a woman screamed. There are horses still inside.
June saw her then Mrs. O'Rourke from Red Mesa, visiting her sister. The older woman was fighting against the men holding her back. My sister's inside, she sobbed. She went for the horses, Margaret went for the horses. Boone didn't hesitate. He dismounted, already moving toward the inferno. June grabbed his arm. You can't, it's suicide. He shook her off. Stay here, help the injured. But Tom was already beside him, along with Roberto and 2 other cowboys. They wrapped wet blankets around themselves and plunged into the smoke. June forced herself to turn away, to focus on what she could do. There were burns to treat, smoke inhalation, cuts from the frantic evacuation attempts. She worked with steady hands, using the medical supplies they'd brought, trying not to listen for sounds from the stable. June. Ned appeared at her elbow, face streaked with soot. They need a rope, the back wall's starting to collapse. She grabbed coils from their horses. And that's when she saw him, Silas Crowley, standing at the edge of the firelight, watching with satisfaction poorly disguised as concern. Tragic, he said when he saw her looking. But that's what happens when people don't pay for proper protection. The implication hit June like a physical blow. You did this! Careful with accusations. Miss Avery, I've been in town all evening. Plenty of witnesses. His smile was reptilian, though I did hear some homesteaders were behind on their fees. Before June could respond, shouts erupted from the stable. Boone emerged, carrying an unconscious woman. Margaret, Tom, and Roberto followed, each leading terrified horses. The back wall collapsed seconds after they cleared it, sending up a shower of sparks. June ran to help, checking Margaret's breathing, feeling for burns. The woman was alive but badly hurt. Her breathing labored from smoke.
Get her to Doc Halley,
June ordered. Fast! As they loaded Margaret onto a wagon, June noticed something a burn on her arm, too regular to be accidental. It looked like someone had held her down, marked her.
Boone,
she called quietly. Look at this. His face darkened as he saw the mark. Sons of... He cut himself off, looking around. Where's Crowley? The sheriff had vanished, but his message was clear. Pay or burn. They stayed until dawn, helping the community save what little they could. The stable was a total loss, along with most of the winter feed. Without it, the homesteaders would have to sell their livestock at rock-bottom prices, probably to Crowley's associates. This can't stand, Tom said as they finally headed back to the herd. He's burning people out now. No proof, Boone said bitterly. Never is with Crowley. June rode in exhausted silence, her mind turning over the problem. They reached camp to find disaster of a different kind during the night. Someone had driven off 50 head of prime cattle. Found these. Dale held up a set of horseshoes. Special marking, same as Crowley's ranch uses. It was too much. Boone exploded, his careful control finally shattering. He raged at the men, at the situation, at the endless losses. June watched, understanding his fury but knowing it solved nothing. When he finally wound down, she approached carefully. We need to be smarter than him. How? Boone's voice was raw. He owns the law, controls the water, burns out anyone who opposes him. What's left? The truth, June said, and each other. That evening, as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, June made a decision. She waited until Boone was on watch, then approached him at the edge of the firelight. I'll go to him, she said without preamble. Boone turned sharply. What? Crowley wants me. Thinks I killed Harrison or knows who did. If I turn myself in, agree to work for him. No, the word was flat, final. Absolutely not. Listen to me. I could get inside his operation, find evidence. I said no. Boone grabbed her shoulders. Gentle despite his intensity. You don't understand what you're saying. Crowley doesn't just want you as a worker. The way he looks at you. June met his eyes steadily. I know exactly how he looks at me. But if it means protecting the homesteaders, protecting this crew, I won't trade your safety for theirs. That's not your choice to make. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Boone's hands gentled on her shoulders, sliding down to hold her arms. Please, he said, and the words seemed to cost him. Don't do this. We'll find another way. What if there isn't one? There's always another way. Danny taught me that, even if I forgot for a while. His voice roughened. I can't lose anyone else to men like Crowley. I can't lose you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. June felt her resolve waver, then firm again. Then help me think of something better, because doing nothing isn't an option anymore. They talked through the night, planning and discarding ideas. By dawn, they had the beginnings of a strategy dangerous, possibly foolish, but better than June's sacrificial plan. We need proof of Crowley's crimes. Boone summarized. Real evidence that even his bought judges can't ignore. Ned might help, June suggested. He knows every corner of Red Mesa, every hiding spot. And Lucia Chen, Boone added. She has connections Crowley doesn't know about. It was thin, but it was hope. They would have to split up, some continuing with the herd, others returning to Red Mesa to gather evidence. June would go, despite Boone's protests, because she had the best chance of getting certain people to talk. I'm going with you, he said finally. The herd. Tom can manage for a few days. This is more important. June saw the fear in his eyes, the memory of his brother's death. She touched his face gently. I'll be careful. You better be. The next morning brought another shock. A rider approached under a white flag, one of Crowley's men, bearing a message.
"The sheriff wants to make a deal," the man said. "He's willing to forget about Miss Avery's situation in exchange. She comes to work at his ranch for 6 months. Seamstress work, he says, nothing improper."
"And if we refuse?" Boone asked. "Then he'll pursue theft charges against your whole crew. Claims you've been altering brands, stealing cattle. He's got witnesses ready to swear to it." It was a trap, perfectly sprung. June felt the net closing. Crowley's patience finally exhausted. Around them, the crew muttered angrily, hands drifting to weapons. "Tell Crowley he'll have his answer in 3 days," June said, surprising everyone. "I need time to consider." The messenger left, and June faced the crew's shocked faces. "I'm not actually considering it," she said, "but 3 days gives us time to execute our plan." "Or time for Crowley to tighten the noose," Tom warned. "Then we'd better work fast." That night, they finalized their strategy. It was desperate, relying on Ned's knowledge, Lucia's connections, and the hope that somewhere in Crowley's empire was evidence of his crimes. June would return to Red Mesa openly, appearing to consider his offer, while the others worked in shadows. "If anything happens," Boone started. "It won't," June interrupted. "Have faith." "Faith's for people who haven't buried family," Boone said harshly, then softened. "But I'll try. For you." As they prepared to separate the next morning, June found herself at the corral, watching the Mustang mare broken. The horse approached cautiously, accepting a piece of hardtack from June's hand. "She's getting better," Ned observed, appearing beside her. "We all are," June replied. "Even when it doesn't feel like it?" The boy shifted nervously. "Miss June, about Red Mesa, there's something you should know. Crowley's got a safe in his office. Seen it once when I was cleaning. He keeps papers in there, important ones. Can you get to it? Maybe if someone made a big enough distraction." June smiled grimly. "I think I can manage that." As she mounted Moses for the ride to Red Mesa, Boone caught her stirrup. "Remember what I told you that night?" he said quietly. "Don't hide who you are. Whatever happens in town, don't let him make you small." "I won't," June promised. Then, impulsively, she leaned down and kissed his cheek. "Don't hide who you are either. The man who saves people from fires, who stands against bullies, that's who you really are." She rode away before he could respond, but she carried the image of his stunned expression like a talisman. Behind her, the camp bustled with activity, some preparing to move the herd, others getting ready for their own missions. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly. Ahead lay Red Mesa and Crowley's web of corruption, but June rode steadily forward, no longer the frightened woman who'd stepped off the stage weeks ago. She'd found her courage in unexpected places, in a gentle touch that calmed a frightened horse, in standing beside good people against evil, in choosing to fight rather than flee. The burn scar on Margaret's arm haunted her, as did the tears of families watching their futures burn. Crowley had overplayed his hand with the fire. Now it was time to show him that some people couldn't be bought, burned out, or broken. June Avery was done running. Whatever waited in Red Mesa, she would face it head on. And somewhere behind her, a man who'd lost everything to violence was learning to hope again. The trail split ahead, one path leading to safety, the other to danger. June chose danger, spurring Moses toward the smoke still rising from Coyote Flat, toward Red Mesa and whatever justice could be salvaged from Crowley's kingdom of fear. 3 days. That's all they had to bring down a man who'd ruled through terror for years. It would have to be enough. Eagle Pass Canyon stretched before them like a wound in the earth, its red walls rising sheer on either side. Dust devils danced in the narrow passage, and June felt the hair on her neck rise. This was wrong, all wrong. "Boone," she called softly from the wagon seat.
Something's not right.
He was already scanning the rim, hand on his gun. They'd been driving hard for 2 days since leaving Red Mesa. The evidence Ned had stolen from Crowley's safe burning like a brand in June's satchel. Documents proving theft, extortion, even murder enough to hang Crowley twice over. But they'd underestimated him. "Riders on the rim!" Tom shouted, and then the canyon exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from above. Crowley's men had the high ground, pouring lead down on the exposed drive crew. Cattle bellowed and scattered, cowboys diving for whatever cover they could find. "Get to the rocks," Boone commanded, spurring his horse toward June's wagon. She was already moving, jumping from the seat as bullets splintered the wood where she'd been sitting, the precious evidence she had to protect it. June clutched the satchel to her chest as she ran, Boone covering her retreat. They made it to a cluster of boulders where Tom and others had taken shelter. Dale was bleeding from a graze on his temple, Roberto methodically returning fire with deadly accuracy. "How many?" Boone demanded.
8, maybe 10,
Tom reported. "Crowley's with them. Saw his hat." As if summoned, Crowley's voice boomed down from the rim. "Mercer, send out the woman and those papers she stole, and the rest of you can ride on." "Go to hell!" Boone shouted back. More gunfire, chips of rock stinging their faces. June pressed against the boulder, mind racing. They were pinned down, outgunned, with wounded men and panicking cattle. The evidence that could destroy Crowley was useless if they all died here. "There's another way," Roberto said quietly. He pointed to a narrow crack in the canyon wall. "Climbs up behind their position. One man could make it, maybe 2. "I'll go," Boone said immediately. "You're needed here," June countered. "I'm smaller, faster." And Crowley's target, no. Their argument was cut short by a new sound hoofbeats approaching from the canyon mouth. June's heart sank. Reinforcements for Crowley. But the lead rider carried a familiar sight, Marshal Holloway's badge glinting in the sun. Behind him rode a full posse, including Sheriff Morrison from Preston. "Federal marshals," Holloway's voice rang with authority. "Cease fire immediately." The gunfire stuttered, stopped. June could imagine Crowley's fury at this interference, but he wasn't done yet. Marshal Crowley called down. "These people are harboring a murderer. June Avery killed Harrison Ward." "Then she'll get a fair trial," Holloway responded. "Not a canyon ambush. You and your men come down peaceful, or we come up shooting." Tense silence stretched. June found Boone's hand, squeezed it. If Crowley chose to fight, they were still caught in the middle. Then disaster struck from an unexpected quarter. The gunfire had spooked the remuda, and now the horses bolted directly into the massed cattle. The herd, already on edge, exploded into a stampede. "Run!" someone screamed. 1,500 head of panicked beef thundered through the canyon, a wall of horns and hooves that cared nothing for human conflicts. Cowboys scattered, diving for high ground. June saw Ned, frozen in the path of destruction. She didn't think, just moved. Her boots slipped on loose stone as she sprinted toward the boy, the thunder of the stampede shaking the ground. She grabbed Ned, shoving him toward a rocky outcrop just as the lead steers reached them. Something slammed into her side. Not a cow, but Boone, wrapping his arms around both her and Ned as he pulled them into the shelter of a large boulder. They pressed against the rock as the herd split around it like a river around a stone. So close, June could feel the heat of their bodies, smell the fierce sweat. It lasted forever and was over in minutes. The dust was so thick they couldn't see, could barely breathe. June kept her arms around Ned, felt Boone's sheltering both of them. When the rumble finally faded, they emerged to devastation. The canyon floor was churned to powder, gear scattered or trampled. Men called out, checking on each other. Miraculously, no one from their crew had been killed, though several sported injuries. But on the rim, Crowley's position had been compromised, some of his men trying to escape the stampede's dust cloud. had shown themselves, Holloway's posse had them surrounded. "It's over. Silas," Morrison called. "Come down." June watched Crowley stand slowly, his bulk silhouetted against the sky. Even from this distance, she could see his rage, his disbelief that his empire was crumbling. "You want to know what happened to Ward?" Crowley shouted. Ask what she did when he caught up to her." "I was with the marshal's men," June called back, her voice carrying clear in the canyon. "You know that." "Not that night. The night he disappeared. You were in Preston. So was he." June felt Boone tense beside her. This was Crowley's last card sowing doubt, trying to turn the lawmen against her. "She was with me," Tom said suddenly, loudly. "All night. We were getting supplies, bunked at the livery, plenty of witnesses." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. Tom had slept at the hotel while June stayed with a local family, but his word carried weight, and others backed him up. Roberto, Dale, even Ned piping up with manufactured details. Crowley saw his gambit failing. With a roar of fury, he pulled his gun, not aiming down at them, but at something June couldn't see. A shot rang out. "No!" The scream came from above, followed by sounds of struggle. When the dust settled, Crowley was in custody, but the damage was done. One of his own men lay wounded, shot for suggesting surrender. It was the final proof of Crowley's nature. Witnessed by federal marshals. They made camp that night 5 miles from the canyon, everyone exhausted, trying to round up scattered cattle. June was tending wounds when Holloway approached. "Miss Avery, need to ask you some questions about Ward." Boone started to protest, but June touched his arm. "It's all right." She faced the marshal. "What do you want to know?" "Just the truth. Where were you the night Ward disappeared?" June took a breath. "With the widow Martinez and her daughters. They'll vouch for me. But Marshal, I won't pretend I'm sorry he's gone. He destroyed my life, tried to destroy it again. If something happened to him, maybe it was justice catching up." Holloway studied her. "Funny thing about Ward, found his horse 2 days ago. Hundreds of miles south, heading for Mexico. Saddlebags full of stolen money funds he'd skimmed from his family's business." June blinked. "He ran." "Seems so. Probably figured prison wasn't to his taste." The marshal touched his hat. "Just thought you should know. Man like that, running to Mexico with stolen money, likely to meet a bad end, but that's not your concern anymore." After Holloway left, June stood in stunned silence. Harrison alive, a fugitive himself. The irony was overwhelming. "You all right?" Boone asked quietly. "I think so. It's just all this destruction, all this pain, and he just ran away. Men like Ward are cowards at heart. When push comes to shove, they run." Boone pulled her close. "You didn't. That's the difference." They stood together watching the stars emerge. Around them, the camp slowly settled. Men exhausted by the day's violence and chaos. Tomorrow they'd count their losses. Gather the scattered herd, continue north. But tonight, they were alive. "June," Boone said suddenly. "What I said before, about not losing you." A shot split the night. June felt Boone shove her aside as he drew his weapon, but the shot hadn't come from outside camp. It had come from where they'd secured Crowley. They ran toward the sound, finding chaos. Crowley had somehow gotten a hidden derringer, trying one last escape. In the struggle, he'd shot Tom, who now lay bleeding in the dirt. "Get Doc Halley," June shouted, dropping beside Tom. The wound was bad belly shot, the kind that killed slow and painful. Crowley was on the ground, subdued by the marshals, but his eyes found June. "This is your fault," he snarled. "All of it. If you just come quiet." "Shut up!" Boone's voice was deadly. He knelt beside Tom, who was trying to speak. "Boss," Tom whispered, tell her I died standing up, like a man." "You're not dying," Boone said fiercely. June, do something. She was already working, using every skill she'd learned. But the wound was beyond her abilities. They needed a real doctor, a hospital, neither of which existed within 100 miles. June. Tom's hand found hers. Thank you for the lie about that night. Rest, she urged. Save your strength. But Tom's eyes were already glazing. He squeezed her hand once more, tried to smile, and was gone. The camp erupted in grief and rage. Men who'd ridden with Tom for years wept openly. Dale had to be physically restrained from attacking the bound Crowley. Boone stood slowly, his face carved from stone. He looked at Crowley, then at Holloway. Marshal, I need a moment with the prisoner. Can't allow that. Mercer? I'm not going to kill him. Boone's voice was empty. That would be too quick. He turned away, walking into the darkness. June started to follow, but Roberto caught her arm. Let him go. He needs to be alone with it. They buried Tom at dawn, on a hill overlooking the trail. Every man spoke, sharing memories, jokes, stories of Tom's easy smile and steady gun hand. When it was Boone's turn, he stood silent for a long moment. Tom Rios was my friend, he said finally. My segundo, the closest thing to a brother I had left. He died protecting others, which is how he lived. His voice roughened. Crowley took him from us, but Crowley's going to hang, and Tom's going to be remembered. That's the only justice we get out here. After the burial, as they prepared to move out, Boone found June packing the medical supplies. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'm sorry, June whispered. If I hadn't come. Don't! He pulled back to look at her. Tom made his choice. We all did. You didn't bring Crowley's evil, you exposed it. Boone, I need to tell you something. His hands framed her face. That night, when I told you not to hide who you are, I was talking to myself, too. I've been hiding from feeling, from caring, from letting anyone close. His voice dropped. I can't hide anymore. Not from you. June's throat tightened. Around them, the camp was busy with preparations, but this moment felt separate, sacred. Tom's gone, Boone continued. Could be any of us next, but I'll not waste another day pretending I don't. He stopped, struggling with words. I know, June said softly. I feel it too. He kissed her then, there in the dust and sorrow of the morning, a promise amid loss. When they parted, June saw tears on his face for Tom, for his brother, for all the things taken too soon. Don't hide who you are, June repeated his words back to him. Even when it hurts. Especially then, Boone agreed. They broke camp within the hour, the herd moving north under a cloudless sky. Crowley, in chains, would be taken back for trial. The evidence June had protected would see him hang. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was something. As she drove the supply wagon they'd salvaged, June thought about justice and vengeance, love and loss. The trail had taken Tom, but it had also given her Boone, Ned, this strange family of broken people healing together. Behind them, Tom's grave caught the morning light. Ahead, the mountains rose like promises, and somewhere between memory and hope, June Avery found herself exactly where she belonged, driving cattle with a man who'd learned to stop hiding his heart, carrying the words that had changed them both. Don't hide who you are. The wisdom of it echoed across the vast landscape, a truth as simple and essential as water in the desert. They'd lost much, but they'd found more courage, connection, the strength that comes from facing the world without masks. The trail stretched on, and they followed it together. The morning after Crowley's trial and hanging brought no satisfaction, only emptiness. June stood in the dusty street of Fort Salvation, watching as they cut down the body. Justice had been served, but Tom was still gone, and all the legal victories in the world couldn't change that. It's over, Marshal Holloway said, touching his hat to June. Your name's been cleared in every territory. Wards confirmed alive in Mexico. Wanted for embezzlement. You're free to go wherever you please. Free? The word felt strange in her mouth. Foreign after months of running. She looked at Boone, who stood silent beside her, his face giving nothing away. What now? Ned asked. The boy had grown inches on the trail, hardened by loss but somehow still hopeful. Now we go home, Boone said quietly, such as it is. Home. June had almost forgotten what that meant. They reached the Dry Fork Valley 3 days later. The surviving herd considerably smaller but still valuable. The cattle spread out along the river, grateful for good grass and clean water. June saw it then Boone's land, the place he'd lost his brother. It wasn't much, a burned foundation where the house had stood, a few outbuildings that had survived, and a marker on a hill. Danny Mercer's grave, tended despite 3 years of absence. This is it, Boone said, dismounting slowly. What I've been fighting to get back to? June studied the desolate scene, understanding now why he'd stayed away so long. Every corner held memories, ghosts of what had been. We'll rebuild, she said simply. He turned to her, surprise flickering across his face. Unless you're planning to do it alone. June! He stopped, struggling. This isn't your fight. You're free now. Could go anywhere. Back east. Start over with your shop. I've been running toward something this whole time. June interrupted. I just didn't know what. Now I do. Around them, the crew was making camp. But not all would stay. Some had families waiting. Others had different trails to follow. June saw Roberto talking quietly with Dale. Probably about heading south. The kid had mentioned a girl in San Antonio. That evening, they held a gathering around the fire, one by one. The men announced their plans. Some would stay to help rebuild. Others would move on. Each departure was bittersweet. Bonds forged in hardship not easily broken. When it came to Ned, the boy shifted nervously. I'd like to stay, if you'll have me. Got nowhere else to go. You've got a place here long as you want it, Boone assured him, as the fire burned low. June found herself alone with Boone by Danny's grave. He'd been quiet all evening, the weight of homecoming heavy on his shoulders. Tell me about him, June said softly. Boone's smile was sad but real. Danny was everything I'm not. Quick to laugh, slow to anger. He could charm birds from trees. That boy, Mom used to say he got all the sweetness and left me with the stubborn. Stubborn's not so bad. Got us this far. He would have liked you, Boone continued. Would have pestered you for stories about the East. Probably tried to learn sewing just to spend time near you. June heard the pain beneath the words. Years of guilt and grief. He sounds wonderful. He was, and I failed him. No, June turned to face him fully. The men who killed him, failed basic human decency. You've spent 3 years punishing yourself for their evil. I should have been here. Then you'd be dead too. And who would have fought for justice? Who would have stood up to Crowley? Who would have saved all those homesteaders from burning out? June took his hands. Your brother's death was a tragedy, but your life since hasn't been. You've helped people. Boone, including me. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that as the stars emerged, holding each other in the shadow of loss and the promise of tomorrow. Over the next weeks, they began rebuilding. It was hard work clearing debris, salvaging what they could, starting fresh construction. June discovered muscles she didn't know she had, learned the satisfaction of walls rising straight and true. The surprise was how many people came to help. Word had spread about Crowley's defeat, about the crew that stood against him. Homesteaders arrived with lumber, food, willing hands. Even Lucia Chen made the journey from Red Mesa, bringing supplies and her quiet strength. You did good, Lucia told June one evening. Crowley hurt many people. Now they can heal. June thought of the mare, Broken, who followed her everywhere now like an oversized dog. Healing happened slowly, in small acts of trust. 1 month became 2. The house rose from the ashes, simple but solid. Corrals were rebuilt. The surviving cattle settled. Ned proved invaluable, his quick mind and willing hands making him indispensable. But June noticed Boone growing restless as the work neared completion. He'd stand at the edge of the property, looking toward the horizon like he was waiting for something. "What is it?" she finally asked one sunset, finding him in his usual spot. "I keep thinking Tom should be here," he admitted. "Seeing this being part of it doesn't seem right. Building a future he won't share." "He is here," June said, "in every board we place with care because he taught us to do things right. In Ned, who's becoming the man Tom helped shape. In us, choosing to build instead of destroy." Boone was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Marry me." June's breath caught. "What?" "I know it's not I don't have much to offer. Just this land and whatever we can build on it. But June, He turned to face her fully. "That morning when I thought I might lose you to the stampede, when I held you and Ned against that rock, all I could think was how I'd wasted so much time being afraid. I don't want to waste any more." "Boone, you told me not to hide who I am. Well, who I am is a man who loves you, who's been loving you since you gentled that horse in the moonlight, who wants to wake up every morning knowing you're there, safe and partnered with me in everything." June felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes. Yes, you wonderful, stubborn man, yes." He kissed her then, there on the land that had seen so much sorrow, now witness to joy. They married 2 weeks later, the ceremony simple but perfect. Roberto returned for it, bringing Dale and his new bride, Mrs. O'Rourke, recovered from her sister's ordeal, came from Red Mesa with half the town. Even Morrison from Preston attended, badge shining. But it was Ned who stole the show, producing rings he'd made from horseshoe nails, twisted into delicate circles. "Figured you needed something that would last," he said, blushing furiously. As they exchanged vows, June thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a desperate woman stepping off a stagecoach to this standing with a man who'd learned to hope again, surrounded by chosen family, building something new from the ashes of the old. "I won't hide who I am," she said, adding her own words to the traditional vows. "And I won't let you hide either. We stand together, honest and whole." "Always," Boone agreed, sliding the horseshoe ring onto her finger. Later, as the celebration continued around them, June slipped away to check on Broken. The mare nickered softly, accepting a piece of wedding cake with delicate lips. "We did it, girl," June whispered. "We found our place." The mare nudged her gently, and June saw she wasn't alone. Boone stood in the barn doorway, watching. "No regrets?" he asked. "None, you." "Only that it took so long to find you." They walked back to their guests, hand in hand. June's salvaged wedding dress, owned from Lucia's gift of fabric, catching the light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, ranch work, weather, the endless struggle of frontier life. But tonight was for celebrating survival, love, and the courage to build again. As the stars came out, June stood on the porch of her new home, watching the people who'd become family. Ned was attempting to dance with one of the settlers' daughters, all gangly limbs and red face. Roberto was telling stories that had the cowboys roaring with laughter. Even the memory of Tom felt present, in every joke told, every kindness shared. "Thank you," June whispered to the vast sky, "for the journey, the hardships, the moments that had shaped her into who she'd become." Boone's arms wrapped around her from behind. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm not apologizing anymore. For existing, for taking up space, for being exactly who I am." "Good," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair, "because who you are is exactly who we need." June turned in his arms, seeing in his eyes the same wonder she felt. They'd both been broken, both been lost. But here, in this unlikely place, they'd found themselves and each other. "I won't apologize for existing," she repeated, the words a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. "And I won't hide." Boone added, "Not from you, not from feeling, not from the life we're building." The music from the celebration drifted over them, mixing with laughter and the eternal sound of wind across the plains. June Avery Mercer stood with her husband on the porch of their rebuilt home, no longer running, no longer hiding, finally and completely herself. In the corral, Broken whinnied softly, a sound that spoke of trust earned and peace found. The broken horse, like the broken people, had learned that gentleness could heal what cruelty had damaged. And that, June thought as Boone led her back to their guests, was the finest truth she'd learned on the trail, that courage wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about choosing to rebuild, to trust, to love, even after being broken. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to this small human victory against despair, and June Avery Mercer, who'd once tried to make herself smaller to fit the world's expectations, now stood tall and unashamed, exactly as she was meant to be. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, loss, and redemption in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss June and Boone's journey together. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of courage and romance on the frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more listeners discover these tales of the American West. Until next time, keep riding toward your own horizon, partners.